In Michaelmas term, I identified the population's worsening mental health as a key risk to address, and I looked at the impact of materiality and nature on mental wellness. In Lent term, I took this further and produced a prototype wellness architectural space for Push Wagner's Soft City, a fictional dystopian city with overworked population and neglected well-being. This term, the project is reunified further in a city with similar characteristics as that fictional city. The vertical skyline characterizes this city. With over 315 buildings taller than 150 meters, this concrete forest is Hong Kong.
The number you have called is temporarily unavailable. Please try again later.
Hidden beneath the enticing image of glass skyscrapers and neon advertisements is a city in despair. The famous Kowloon walled city hosted over 33,000 people at one point. It was one of the key inspirations for the dystopian city in popular culture. With a population of 7.5 million, Hong Kong is one of the richest and most dense cities in the world. However, due to its political history and the hilly mountainous terrain, only 24% of its land is developed. Most of the population live in incredibly small apartments in outdated concrete high-rises, with an average living space of 13.4 square meters per person. As one of the most overworked cities in the world, people work an average of 42 hours per week, with a third of the total population working more than 48 hours per week. For the younger generation, there is immense pressure for academic success. 63% of students are enrolled in extra tutoring outside of school. These factors put the population under a lot of stress and pressure, and the conditions are only worsening. The Remind project aims to create an alternative mental health centre without institutional characteristics. This avoids the stigma related to mental health consultations in Hong Kong and helps to promote the acceptance of mental health issues and seeking help. The key users are city dwellers who feel they may need help but do not want the taboo labels of being officially diagnosed. The chosen site is Old St. Joseph's Home for the Aged in Yau Qi Wan. It's 2 minutes away from Choi Hung Station and 27 minutes away from central Hong Kong. It is easily accessible but still distant from the symbolism of work. This will be the only mental well-being facility among other health services in the area and aims to encourage a change in the local opinions on mental health. In 1908, it was bought by one of the 4 bandits of China who helped overthrow the monarchy. It was then leased to the brother of China's first president for a fruit farm. But when he was released into exile, the site was sold to a wealthy businessman who built 3 villas. In 1923, the site was donated to Little Sisters of the Poor to be St. Joseph's Home for the Aged. At its peak, there were 10 buildings on the site. In 1996, the church swapped land with Kowloon developers and the site has since remained unoccupied. The legacy left 3 existing Grade 2 buildings on the site: the gatehouse, the villa, and the dormitory. There are other interesting physical features to consider: the wet market, squatters' structures, Hammer Hill, informal hiking trail, water reservoir, Chai Wan Estate, and the existing fig and mango trees. The site is quiet in comparison to the surroundings. The main building is stepped back to create a buffer zone. Initial attempts to design the mental health rehab in section brought in principles from Lent term: balconies, proximity to forestry, and courtyards. In order to give every room access to a skylight, the apartments were offset. This led to a style of tiered architecture which was popular in London in the 1970s. Among some presidents, Christ College accommodation faced aesthetic backlash, and Alexandra Road Estate experienced antisocial behaviour due to the narrow inner street and lack of mutual surveillance. The Brunswick Centre was the most successful, because it introduced an inhabited centre. In comparison to the site, the Brunswick Centre is larger, but the same principles can be adapted. The Grade 2 buildings will be repurposed for formal consultation and treatment spaces. They were designed with high ceilings, thick walls, and good ventilation. Past Dormitory A, an informal crossroad connects the old and new buildings, and connects the village and residential towers, increasing mutual surveillance and integration between neighbourhoods. This connection will demonstrate to the existing community that people who struggle with mental health are not that different from them. On the ground floor, there will be Hong Kong-style cafes, shops, and conference spaces. The cafes will bring people to the recovery centre, creating a sense of community. The conference spaces will be used to promote awareness of mental health and also for general skills workshops to enrich the community. Like Tung Lao's of Hong Kong, above the shops will be studio apartments intended for short-term stays for mental well-being recovery. As a stressed worker exits the MTR station, they walk through a formal garden and begin to slow down as they approach the building. The garden gives a sense of order and direction. This landscape becomes more organic once they pass the Grade 2 dormitory, creating a sense of a new, calmer, slower-paced world, and mimicking the classical Chinese Nanyang gardens nearby the site, and integrating the landscape with Ham Hill. The new buildings are low-rise, but the balconies face inwards to the calm garden and to the mountains to avoid sight of the concrete forest around. The low-rise buildings also mean lighter loads and shorter cantilever spans. The cantilever can be supported by timber columns, which create an arcade for the shops below. The structure is timber frame, going back to traditional methods of building before the population surge. The barrier of trees around the site filters out pollution and fine dust and promotes better quality of air in the centre. Unlike conventional concrete homes of Hong Kong, an interior of untreated timbers will release beneficial volatile organic compounds that help the body calm down on a biochemical level. Research from Lent-Term demonstrated that birch bark can be beneficial. Therefore, the flooring will be birch bark veneer, which is soft to step on. And because Hong Kong culture is to remove shoes indoors, the warm timber flooring will help rehabilitate through tactility. It will stimulate the vagus nerve, which will send impulses to slow down heart rate and relax. The windows and balcony doors are fitted with sliding louver mechanisms, which function as air purifying devices, bringing in the VOC from the birch bark louvers as air flows through and prevents direct sunlight to avoid solar gain. The ridge beam and rafters are exposed on the top floor. Using a light timber, this creates an elevated ceiling which helps the inhabitant feel less confined and less suppressed. A raised skylight will bring in diffuse light to create a well-lit interior. The orientation avoids the midday sun to minimize solar gain. Balconies have floor openings to introduce more light to lower floors. Thresholds around the apartment are lined with miniature gardens, so calmness permeates throughout the studio. While allowing space to meditate and connect with the surroundings, it also removes the occupant from the pressing energy of the city. Most Hong Kong citizens do not know their neighbours. Everyone lives their own lives behind closed doors. But in this centre, they can interact with neighbours in the courtyard, in the garden, and on their balconies. The Remind Centre focuses on creating a tranquil atmosphere for mental health recovery. It is also a strategy to promote mental well-being in a culture that finds it taboo. By encouraging a connection among the community, stories can be shared and people can understand mental health conditions better. In a busy city with high rates of suicide, a solution is needed urgently. This project can be the start of a bottom-up strategy where communities can support each other in times of need.